What is going on, and welcome to another episode of the Time Killers Podcast, a show about games, movies, and everything else we kill time with. My name is Neil Rivera, and I'm killing time with a man who has gone toe-to-toe with the Lord of Hatred himself. It's Matthew Field.
An epic battle. An epic battle.
An epic battle indeed. Before we talk about Diablo 4, Lord of Hatred, and Path of Exile 2, we've got a big old ARPG extravaganza for you. Matthew and I are actually going to be recapping Summer Game Fest. So last episode we talked about the PlayStation State of Play, gave you our reactions to that and all the announcements there. So go back and listen to that if you haven't already. But we wanted to make sure we recapped the rest of the Summer Game Fest announcement season for you all here. So we're going to be jumping into that before we break down Diablo 4 and Path of Exile in the back half of the show. But before we jump into that, I want to remind you guys that you can listen to any past episodes and find us on your social network of choice at timekillerspod.com. Don't forget to, once you follow us, DM us your questions, comments, and hot takes. We want them all. Please be part of the show and be part of this community that we're building. And don't forget to subscribe to us on whatever podcast service that you are listening to us here on, and leave us a review. Give us 5 stars and let us know how much you love us. All right, enough about that. Let's jump right into it. Summer Game Fest. So Sony went first, if I'm not mistaken, with their State of Play, and we had a cavalcade of shows after that. The PC Gamer Show, the Future Games Showcase, Wholesome Direct, what else? What am I missing? Xbox Showcase, and of course, Day of the Devs, and Nintendo closing it out with their sort of surprise Direct that was heavily rumored. Matthew and I have 3 announcements that excited us from the Summer Game Fest season across all of the different shows, and we're just going to go round robin and talk about the games that stood out to us the most. So Matthew, I'm going to put you on the spot first. What excited you coming out of Summer Game Fest 2026?
So I will start with Vivarium. I am blanking on which showcase this was actually debuted at, but it is it's a slice of life, or a life sim adventure game by Studio Meadowflower, I think, and I believe this is their first game.
Yes.
And it from what it seems, from what we gather from the trailer, it seems like you play as a child who is in a kind of terrarium, like a small little bottle world. And there's like kind of a town in there that you get to walk around in and, chat up villagers. And it's all kind of rendered in this very like 80s anime aesthetic.
This is the Ghibli game. This is the let's just call it what it is. It's the Studio Ghibli art style.
Specifically like early Ghibli, because there's another game that we're going to talk about that's like a little bit later. But yeah, early Ghibli, this definitely has a strong similarity to. And it just looks very like very chill. It has like it's a vibe basically. And the animations look amazing, but it looks like there may be something else kind of going on there, related to your place in this small little world, and whether this is whether you break out, or I don't know. But there's some kind of insinuation that you either become aware of your place in this small world, or investigate it in some way. So even if there is none of that, I think it looked interesting enough and was just beautiful enough to really catch my eye and be one of the biggest kind of coolest announcements that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, the art style for this one is definitely a winner for sure, and it took me a while. I finally figured out where it was. It was in the Xbox Games Showcase, but you wouldn't be mistaken if you had like thought that this was at the like the Wholesome Games or like some sort of cozy game direct, because it's got a very cozy vibe to it with the art style. But yeah, it's like this adventure game, and it's, yeah, like it looks really cool. Like it's got like a, like I said, the art style looks really striking and fun. So yeah, definitely one of the standouts from the Xbox show. I think, similarly to the state of PlayStation State of Play, I came away from the Xbox showcase thinking that a lot of the games shown were sort of meant for a particular audience, and this one was one that stood out and kind of went against that. So yeah, I'm excited for it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was maybe one reason why it did stand out so much, is because so much of these other showcases were just like violence, gore, blood, and this
Dark,
one,
brooding.
yeah. And here you get this really nice, like just really, really chill thing at one of the major showcases. So yeah.
I am going to go in the complete opposite direction of you and go with arguably the biggest reveal of the season outside of the Ocarina of Time remake. I'll give Nintendo that. But that's Final Fantasy VII Revelation, which was, the everyone coming into this, we all were wondering what the third one was going to be titled. I was, I'm going to preface this by saying, Final Fantasy VII up until very recently was my favorite game of all time. These modern remakes, I think, are hitting for me, like Final Fantasy VII, like other Final Fantasy VII fans, they're hitting for me in a way that, like, they're hitting all the right notes, right? I definitely think that Rebirth had some issues. And I still have concerns after this reveal, and some of the interviews that the director, who I'm totally blanking on now, he kind of was making his rounds at Summer Game Fest, and doing a bunch of interviews with a bunch of gaming outlets, and he didn't really do anything to quell any of the concerns I have coming out of Rebirth that this is going to be a smaller game, but everything they're adding around what I would say is one of the best combat systems in video games, with the job system. And then, of course, just it being the sort of the climactic finale of the story. And, knowing, obviously, from my time playing the original, what all that's going to entail, the different places that we're going to go. And, obviously having Vincent and Sid as playable characters. So the additions that they showed off that we kind of knew were coming, were great, and I was happy to see them, but there were still some surprises in that reveal, and with things that they're doing to sort of beef it up and modernize it, that also have me excited. Namely the job system, which was really, really cool, being able to switch out, like have different jobs for your characters, which is, it's a Final Fantasy staple, but Final Fantasy VII was interesting in that it was traditionally jobless. So it's kind of cool that it's going back and adopting some of the legacy Final Fantasy systems here for the remake. But yeah, I'm super excited for it. Can't wait. It's going to be a day one purchase. Let's go.
Yeah, I think I want to be excited about this, and I played Remake and I played a lot of Rebirth, but it lost me with how just inflated it was for that section of the game. I didn't end up finishing it, and was honestly kind of frustrated with it by the time I put it down. It just, I wanted to like it. It felt just like it couldn't get out of its own way long enough for me to have the experience that I wanted to with it. So I don't know. I right now I'm saying that I'm not going to play Revelation. I mean, it's not. I've played the original. It's not like it's going to spoil anything for me if I don't go back and finish Rebirth. So I don't know. Maybe if we see that if it comes out that it's not quite as padded, or at least more of what the additional length is optional versus in the main story, the critical path. I might be convinced to go back and pick up Revelations as well, because it does. I mean, the combat system is fantastic, and I like all these characters and stuff. I just, it was just, it needs to have a consistent pace throughout it for me to retain interest.
I agree with that. And yeah, a lot of what they were saying was still concerning me. Like, they went into depth. Like, there's a whole like Queen's Blood campaign, and I'm probably like one of 10 people that didn't actually enjoy the Queen's Blood minigame in Rebirth. So like hearing them go into detail about like this, they expanded on it, which I'm not surprised that they did that. But, hearing in some cases that they expanded definitely concerns me. But I did read and see somewhere that they were easing some of the friction around some of that, where it was like making some of that stuff optional, where in Rebirth it was like mandating that you interact with these mini games, which weren't always fun.
Yeah, I mean, like Witcher 3 figured this out with Gwent, a decade ago. And I like Queen's Blood, but yeah, that it should be optional. You should not have to play that sort of thing outside of maybe like the one intro thing that gates your progress or whatever. Make the rest of it optional, and the people who like it will definitely seek it out.
Yep. Yeah. Even the Final Fantasy sickos like myself, I think I got a little tired of it, but I'm sure there are sickos who are more sicko than I am that will eat up more of it. But yeah, I'm excited for it. It's hard to find a reason to not be excited for the culmination of the remake trilogy of the game that sort of defined your childhood. So that's kind of a cheap, easy pick for me, low hanging fruit, if you will. Matthew, what stood out to you next at Summer Game Fest?
My next pick is Into the Wind. This was at the PC Gaming Show. And we talked about how Vivarium has a certain Ghibli vibe. This is kind of like later Ghibli, like a Porco Rosso style.
Yeah.
And it's also rendered in a different graphical style, which might account for some of the differences there. Like this is fully 3D 3D rendering and then the 3D world and everything. While Vivarium is sort of like got the more traditional hand-drawn anime appearance to it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, this from the trailer, it looks like there are honestly like there's like some Death Stranding kind of elements to it. The way you got you're piling up these packages, both on your jet, your plane car, your plane motorcycle, or your motorcycle that has wings.
I'm looking at the description of the game right now, and it's drive, fly, and run deliveries together with your sentient motorcycle plane, which sounds awesome.
Yeah. And you stack up, you're stacking up packages to deliver to people, and you're talking to townsfolk and everything. So, I mean, I love some Death Stranding. This is another game that looks beautiful. It's even got some like aerial combat that looks like in the 10 seconds worth of that they show in this trailer, it reminded me of like a Crimson Skies type deal. All of it just seems very cool. A slightly more action adventure vibe to it than Vivarium, but similar like good feel vibes. And yeah, I this caught me off guard, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I totally missed the PC game show, and I happened to catch the trailer for this either like on TikTok or whatever, and it totally caught me. And I think that Death Stranding is a perfect comparison for this, because you are doing the sort of like mundane delivery tasks, but then there is like this really robust like flight system that it looks like you're flying this plane around. There's combat. It looks really, really cool. And definitely the art style, the Ghibli art style here also stands out. But this is one that I think I'm gonna have to wishlist as well.
And I don't think it has a release date yet. I think they have said that it will be coming to early access first, so I would assume we get the early access release before too long, and then maybe a year or whatever we get the full release.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to keep an eye on this one, because I think this is one that as Death Stranding fans like ourselves, I think this is one that could definitely hit for us.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna keep it on the sort of smaller indie side and talk about a game that I saw at Day of the Devs, and that is Mr. Records. So similarly to kind of how you described Into the Wind, Mr. Records is also combining two sort of gameplay genres and styles with a really cool, unique art style. So in Mr. Records, you play as an older gentleman. I can't remember his name. I'm not, but you play as like an owner of like a record shop, like a vinyl store. And so the sort of main gameplay hooks here are you are, managing the record store in the evening and like making recommendations to people based on like specific tastes or other sort of like criteria that they have. So there's like that business, management, like making sure your customers are happy side. But then there is also this really colorful, like rhythm based platforming sequences as well. And it's all wrapped up in this really just bright, cartoony, colorful aesthetic. I mean, that's kind of like the I think the theme with this that's sort of sticking with us so far through these games is that they've got just really cool, quirky, unique art styles, and this one definitely does. But I think the thing that really stood out to me was just how it's combining the two gameplay systems. I love a good gameplay mashup. But yeah, this is definitely one, like, as a music lover and as someone who enjoys like business management games, I think this is one that's speaking to me.
Yeah, I watched Day of the Devs, and I think I missed the like initial intro to this trailer because I saw the part of them where they're like actually showing the people recording this, and I was like, oh, that's neat that they're showing all that stuff. But I missed like the gameplay that they show before they go into that section where you got the platformer and where he's like sliding around like what looks like, I don't know, like water slides and then catching little floating bubbles. It looks really cool. And then you've got the sections where you're actually managing the record store and interacting with it in that way. So it like you said, we're clearly honing in on the stuff that was a little bit more vibrant and atypical for what you usually get at these showcases.
But you know what? And like this is, I'm kind of spoiling the later part of our conversation where we talk about the shows like overall. But like I think that's kind of one of my critiques of Keeley's show specifically, the Summer Game Fest, is that it is a lot of just Souls likes and these sort of dark, gritty, violent worlds. So it was refreshing to see some of the more colorful stuff in other shows.
For sure, yeah, I agree.
Going away from the bright and colorfulness, though, I'm going back into gritty realism with my last pick. Clutch. This is the narrative racing game by previous, Playground Games devs. I think we talked about it last episode when we were talking about Forza Horizon 6 as well. So this got a big blowout here, big reveal trailer. Obviously, it is a narrative focus like we talked about, but I thought this trailer was awesome. It was more of a tone piece, but like you can tell the sort of narrative flavor that they're going for, and it's coming across very, very strongly. So I'm excited for this. I'm excited for, continuing our conversation from last episode. I'm excited for more racing games to, do more with the act of racing just than like, big open world with tons of stuff to do. So I like that they're going down the narrative focus here. And I think the narrative that they're at least pitching here in the trailer looks compelling enough that I want to give this a try.
Yeah, I was already pretty much sold on this, just hearing the description, who was behind it, and sort of the pitch for the game before this trailer even dropped. And yeah, I was beyond sold once they showed the trailer. I mean, it essentially, it pitches this as like a Grand Theft Auto but instead of the sequences where you'd be like getting out of your car and shooting, you're instead like off-road driving or like participating in like illegal driving, and then you have the legal driving aspects of it where you're racing on a circuit, and you're of course like you're in like, I think it's like the French Riviera or something. Yeah. So I mean, the scenery and the locations that it's looking like, it looks as good as what you would expect from like a Forza Horizon game. Obviously we haven't gone through and seen the the in-depth gameplay yet to see how it controls, how it plays, or any of that stuff. Obviously, like I mentioned in the last episode, I think we take for granted just how good Forza Horizon games feel and
Yeah.
how consistent they are to drive. So we'll see if they can mimic that kind of, really nice game feel. But I think I'm in on this one. This one looks great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's enough, space in the racing genre for, especially, if I almost want them to play around with the driving mechanics by, keep it, make it feel good and, responsive. But like, I would almost be a little disappointed if it comes out and it handles almost exactly like Forza,
Oh
or,
yeah,
like
yeah.
hyper realistic. There's opportunities, like Screamer, even though they didn't quite nail that system, to do something unique and fun and more arcadey, especially since you're not really focused on the realism of the driving. It's more about the narrative.
Yeah, I certainly did not mean to suggest that like they should be copying the Forza Horizon game feel,
Yeah.
but I think it needs to feel good in a way that Forza Horizon does.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Also, shout out to them using the Killers. Oh God, I had the song title here. Hold on. All these things I've done. Shout out to them for using
Yes.
all these things that I have done. The Killers song. I always want to call it like I've got soul, but that's not the, they say I've got soul, but I'm not a soldier. But anyway, shout out to using the Killers in your trailer. That's a 10 out of 10 choice for me and makes me more likely to buy your game.
Yeah, agreed. Good choice.
Matthew, what was your third standout from the Summer Game Fest?
My third choice is Gen Atlas, which was this was at the I think this was at the Summer Game Fest proper,
Yes.
which is the new game from
Fumito
Gen.
Ueda.
Yeah, Ueda. The I think the studio itself is Gen Design. So
Okay.
yeah, this game, it looks uh beautiful, moody, kind of desolate, very on brand for what his
Yeah.
style of games have been in the past, which is like there's like a sense of like mystery, but also of like loneliness,
Yeah.
given the large volume of expanses and like the lack of other people that you're there with, in that space.
Mhm.
And I mean, this one, it looks like this is none of his games have featured like guns before. And I think this
Yeah.
one, they showed off a little bit of gunplay in this one. I don't expect there to be a ton of combat, maybe like on the level of like a Shadow of the Colossus. So, I think this looks like a really cool evolution of his style.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm a sucker for giant robots,
Mhm.
I'm going to play it. And, it also makes me want to go back to play The Last Guardian, which I did not play of his. So I might do that in the run up to this game. But this one was a big eye catcher for me in a way that I
Yeah.
did not expect. And yeah, it looks very cool. I'm very curious to. I'm sure they're going to be kind of tight lipped on some of the stuff, just
Yeah.
given how much of those games are about discovery, and they're not going to give too much away pre-release, but um, I'm really looking forward to when this one drops.
Yeah. Ueda is one of the like sort of unsung, we talk about like the auteur developers, and I think he's one of the more unsung ones. I would classify him as like an auteur. He's
Yeah,
definitely has this reputation since the PS2 era. But yeah, I was not expecting to see this game here, and I wasn't expecting it to be futuristic. I wasn't expecting it to feature guns. So a lot of surprises, but yeah, I mean the sort of spirit of Shadow of the Colossus and all these other games that he's worked on in the past, definitely that DNA shone through. And yeah, I'm with you where I'm all about the setting, being this like sort of desolate post-apocalyptic world. I know we see that a lot, especially with like robots and future tech. But yeah, I mean, something about that paired with the isolation and the loneliness, the solitude, and just how big and like serene a lot of the worlds that they make in their previous games are. I'm excited to see how they adopt that to a more like science fiction-y setting.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's, like I said, it feels like a natural evolution, to what he's done before. So I'm very curious about it. Also interesting that this is a Epic Game Store exclusive on PC.
Yeah.
So You don't get many of those anymore. Most everything is out on Steam, and who knows if it'll be a timed release or something. But um, yeah, that's an interesting. Epic is the publisher here.
That's interesting too, because they were also the publisher on Alan Wake 2. Or not, sorry, I don't know if they were the publisher on Alan Wake 2, but I know that Alan Wake 2 was an Epic Game Store exclusive. And I remember reading or seeing something about like that game just now started making a profit. So I wonder if, locking it to the Epic Game Store versus including it on Steam hurt them in some ways. And I hope that doesn't happen with Gen Atlas, because, it is sort of a more niche audience. Like, it's only going to appeal to sort of like us hardcore, people who've been playing like PS2 since, games since the PS2 days. So yeah, I do worry like limiting it.
I have to figure that they don't have to agree to Epic Games publish. There was a deal struck here. I think you go into this knowing that you're going to sell fewer copies if you're exclusive on. If you're exclusive on any store, whether it's Epic or not, especially Epic. But even if you were going to restrict it to some other store, you're always just you're gonna sell some amount less just by nature of what you're doing. But I would think that they have to have gotten a pretty good deal, like incentives or whatever. Who knows what it was, but the game, like the studio, this game is going to be enough. It's going to get enough eyeballs to where they could have had any other publisher. It was probably pretty sought after. So I would hope that Epic gave them a pretty good deal to sweeten the pot for them.
I would imagine they did. I hope they did, because it's Ueda, and you got to back up a truck full of cash to Ueda.
It's his first non-Sony published game, I think. All the other ones were Sony. So the fact that this is going to be out on Xbox is going to draw more attention to it already.
That's true. I totally forgot that all of his games were previously exclusive. Much less published by Sony, if, to varying degrees. Yeah, I'm excited for it. It looks great. And I think, it's hard to bet against Ueda-san. So,
for sure.
Go get him, Gen Atlas. Matthew, there was one other game that stood out to both of us before we move on. And that was Crossfire, which was it's announced it's being developed by That's No Moon Studios. They've been working on this game for a while now, but they founded the studio a few years ago, and they've been working on this ever since. It's a mismatch, or not mismatch, but it's a hodgepodge of Naughty Dog, ex-Naughty Dog, ex-EA, and I forget somewhere else, but there's this sort of, the idea is blending the really good shooter gameplay with the sort of writing chops of Naughty Dog, and that's what's brought us to Crossfire. They're working with the Crossfire license, which is, for those of you who don't know, a very popular online shooter game in China. And so there have been various attempts at trying to bring it over here to the United States and popularize it that just haven't panned out. The last one being Crossfire X, which had a single player campaign developed by Remedy that didn't do too hot. So yeah, it seems like we've got That's No Moon sort of taking another stab at it, and their answer, I guess what they've sort of come up with here is a hybrid, like, third person cover shooter. But instead of the traditional cover, it's all about like taking cover like behind natural rock formations and like terrain, and like it's adaptive cover is what they called it. But then beyond that, there's also this story that it appears that you're going to be playing as two sort of opposing operatives that are like part of different armies or have different allegiances to different countries. It's kind of unclear, but the sort of narrative hook is that they're going to have to work together, army of two style, to sort of get through whatever situation it is together. So yeah, while the gameplay intrigued me at first, I'm the jury's out on like whether or not the adaptive cover is going to be good, and like I'm sure, given the sort of pedigree that this game, the development team behind this game, like I'm sure that the gameplay will be good. But I have lots of question marks about this story, man. It definitely seems like both sides have problems kind of a story, and it's like, do we really need one of those right now? Like, do we really need one of those?
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be the route that they go here. I mean, because when they mention that they're from different sides, and without going into much detail, and then you immediately the bulk of this trailer is spent on like them seeing weird alien. I have to assume it's alien or some kind of
Yeah.
like you know, human made weapon that is made to have some kind of weird alien like properties. That I mean, it looks kind of interesting. It depends on what they do with it narratively. I think,
Mhm.
I don't know. I've talked about this before. I miss we don't get as many just like single player, shooter campaigns anymore outside of the
True.
Call of Duties. There used to be a lot. And
Mhm.
we still, I mean, not to say they don't get any, but it doesn't feel like we get as many as we used to. Where it's
By
just like
shooter, do you mean like military shooter specifically, or like just third person shooter in general?
primarily military. Yeah, where you're
Yeah,
where
yeah,
you've got maybe it's going to be a solid mechanically a well-made shooter, and maybe they have one or two quirks to what they're doing to that formula, and you get an interesting story, and it's basically like playing a movie, like I'm thinking
hmm
like the
hmm
Titanfall. Like Titanfall is obviously an exemplary example of this. Titanfall 2, and its campaign, but like that sort of thing where
yeah,
it's like it shipped with a multiplayer game, but you also had a single player, that where they got to kind of flex some different muscles than they do in the multiplayer side of things.
yeah.
Um, I really like those. It's like, to me, it's just like watching an action movie. I like those a
hmm
lot. I get a lot of enjoyment out of those, and this looks like one that that has some interesting pedigree behind it. Like you mentioned, a lot of notable alumni from other big studios. Um, the fact that this is branded Crossfire, I don't know enough about Crossfire as a franchise to know whether that's like supposed to signify anything. This game is like, are people who
Yeah.
really know Crossfire, or did they pick up something from this trailer that I didn't? I think probably not. I think if anything, it's just like an umbrella, a way to get
Yeah.
additional eyeballs onto something that's being made, but I don't know for sure. So yeah, I think this one looks pretty eye catching. It's obviously got a narrative focus and a big budget, so yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, despite my sort of like qualms or like concerns with the story, it does give me Spec Ops: The Line vibes, which I would
Yes,
argue is sort of what I would say the peak of this kind of
a
storytelling,
hundred
right? Like
percent.
the third
Yes,
person military shooter, where like that one where like I would even say the gameplay for that was like subpar, where the story elevated
yeah,
it. So I think if this one kind of has both and it doesn't get too hokey with the story, I think this has got the potential to be a banger for sure. Yeah, a part of me is also like, why Crossfire? And the only, maybe this is just the cynic in me, but like the fact that it's just big overseas, like it's probably a way for like a new studio to secure funding. Like, hey, we're working on a quote unquote established IP, but we're gonna like make it appeal more to American audiences. So I think the combination of like a quote unquote established IP with a team of veterans probably was what they wanted to, go with for their first pitch. I'm excited, man. Like I'm rooting for them. Like I want to figure out or see why this franchise is so popular. And like kind of like what you said, like I don't know if there's even going to be any of that original game's DNA here. It would be really cool if there is. But yeah, I want more of these kind of shooters that are military focused but actually have thoughtful stories to say. Yeah, I think we could all use a bit more of those, so hopefully they nail the story.
and I think, I mean, if you look at the last, like you mentioned, Crossfire X, Remedy made the single player portion of that game,
Hmm.
and I did not finish it. It was not great.
Not Remedy.
Yeah, it didn't feel. It felt like, again, I played very very minimal of it, but it felt like Remedy was working under some serious restrictions to what they were able to do. It does not look like they had as much creative freedom as That's No Moon has
Mm.
for this one. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it did not feel like a Remedy game. But I do think that lends credence to your point about they probably got, the Crossfire IP owners were like, "Hey, we're looking for another studio to make a game here," and they probably pitched that specifically to get funding to make it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I hope it succeeds. I hope it's good. I'll definitely have an eye on it.
Well, before we move on to our break and we talk about Diablo and Path of Exile 2, did you have any thoughts on the sort of Summer Game Fest as a whole? Were there any surprises? And who did you think had the best show overall, in your opinion?
I thought it was. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, when you kind of know, or you know what to expect when you're getting like these E3 style things. It's where you're going to get the biggest announcements, right? Like the biggest, the biggest for the mass market, right? Like it's like a summer movie type thing. You're going to get the blockbusters here. This is not going to be for your niche games. Obviously, there's going to be some in the smaller showcases and stuff, but the biggest games are going to be on display here, and that's going to be where the conversation is dominated by. So in that regard, I think it was successful in that regard. I think, getting, Resident Evil Veronica announced. We didn't talk about that, but that was like the most like, yep, that makes total sense to announce that here, type announcement. It seems cool, but there's nothing surprising about them announcing that here. And
there were a lot of leaks ahead of this show as well. Like even on the Nintendo side, right? Like we didn't talk much about Nintendo, but that Ocarina of Time remake, like there was definitely a sort of divisive reaction to that because it was essentially a teaser. And I think the reason because it was so divisive was because we all essentially knew that it was getting announced. So, a couple of those moments that sort of took the wind out of the sails. But yeah, I agree with you in that. Like this, I mean, I've probably been feeling that Summer Game Fest has replaced E3 for a couple of years now. But I think this year, like it really did feel like, okay, yeah, like we're in the middle of it. It's summer game season. Like everyone's here bringing their big guns. Like it definitely felt like the big three, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo were like kind of like the olden days of E3 where they're like trying to bring their best and put their best foot forward. I know that that's the case for every year, but like this year definitely felt like, like there was a lot of different games across a lot of different genres for different people. I think the shows themselves were kind of weird. Like some of the individual shows got a little too pigeonholed with who they were trying to talk to. But yeah, overall, I think I enjoyed it. Did you have a favorite show out of the ones that you watched or?
I mean, I think if we're going to compare like the console holders, like Nintendo, Sony, and Xbox, I would still give it to Sony. They came in first. I think theirs was still probably front to back my favorite. Not that they. I mean, again, we're not talking about exclusives or anything here. I think, but just like the quality of the games that they got for their showcase. I think probably overall the best. There weren't many weak links there. Followed by Xbox for me personally. I was not huge on the Nintendo showcase simply for the reason that you mentioned. Like they teased Ocarina, they showed off a bunch of stuff that we already kind of knew about, and didn't have that much new stuff to kind of announce or anything.
I think I liked the lineup of games at Nintendo's the most overall, but I think it did have the most, like this could have been an email energy.
Yes, exactly.
Because Splatoon Raiders and like all of these games look great, but we knew, they were known quantities. Like Splatoon Raiders is out next month. So, and same thing with like Rhythm Heaven, that got kind of like an extended look and like that's out in a month. So I get why they're here and why they needed to be included. But yeah, as someone who comes to these events for, the big guns, the new stuff, like only getting Zelda was kind of a disappointment there for Nintendo. There was one game that I'm gonna shout out, Final Fantasy Resonance, which is the first HD 2D Final Fantasy. Like it looks like they're doing the Octopath HD 2D style, but like telling a more traditionally Final Fantasy story, and I'm all in. It's also just they're just porting over the Brave Exvius game that closed down, but modifying it to make it more single player, a la Octopath Traveler 0. So I was very excited about that. But the Nintendo Direct was definitely another one one of those where it fit into, like, if you're not a fan of JRPGs, like, there's not much for you here.
Yeah, I do think Final Fantasy looks good. I've always heard good things about like the sort of campaign in Brave Exodus, but I was never going to play Brave Exodus as it was. So yeah, I especially having dabbled with the demo for Tales or Adventures of Elliot and that being in the 2D style and that playing so well, I think there's definitely potential there.
All right, we've talked about Summer Game Fest enough. We're going to go to break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about Diablo 4, Lord of Hatred, and Path of Exile 2, Return of the Ancients. Stay right there. And we're back. Matthew, there is not a single genre of game, I think, that I have spent more, I shouldn't say spent, wasted more of my time on than action RPGs. I love a good dungeon crawler, creating my character, picking a build, and just spending hundreds of hours going through procedurally generated dungeons, killing monsters, and getting loot, and just rinse, wash, and repeat. Like, that's one of my favorite things to do in video games. And so this year, I think, is just, I think, the perfect time to be a fan of those games, because we've got not one, but two giant expansions to arguably, I would say, the two most popular games in the genre today. So I've jumped into Path of Exile 2, Return of the Ancients, which is the newest expansion for Path of Exile 2, which has been out in early access for some time now. Just a little bit of background. I have been a long time, despite my love of action RPGs, I've only really ever played Diablo and like a couple of other smaller ones. So this is my first time. I didn't play Path of Exile 1. I didn't play Path of Exile 2 during the early access. I'm jumping, or not during like the initial early access launch. But I am jumping into it here for the expansion, and it seems like my timing could not be any better, because they have totally overhauled the game in a lot of ways, making it more approachable for, like more casual players like myself. One of the big announcements that they sort of teased with the new league is that they're bringing a build viewer to the sort of like in-game client. Previously the Path of Exile community, well known for, I guess one thing that Path of Exile games are really known for is like their big expansive skill trees. There's lots of different nodes that you can select and unlock as you level up. So, the community has these really robust and in-depth build guides. And one of the big things is that they're baking it into the game now, which is really cool. So all that to say that, they've been updating and overhauling the game to make it like sort of more casual friendly. I think in the comparison between Path of Exile 2 and Diablo 4, Path of Exile 2 leans more hardcore, like what you're doing, you're min-maxing your build. So yeah, I mean, I've been playing it. I'm about 20 hours in. Matthew and I, neither of us have completed we're on the verge of completing the campaigns for both Path of Exile 2, and Matthew is close to finishing it for Diablo 4, Lord of Hatred. So we haven't really experienced the end game in either of those, but we wanted to sort of talk about our experiences, our combined experiences, and sort of compare and contrast the two, since they're both coming out this year. And so, yeah, as a new Path of Exile 2 player coming over from the more casual Diablo series, I think this is like, I get why this is as popular as it is. I think the things that immediately stand out to me as a new Path of Exile player is just the just sort of moodiness and the like just the really high fidelity, in terms of like the art direction and the overall visual presentation. It really reminds me of like old classic Magic the Gathering, just that really dark, almost grotesque at times, but not too grotesque. Like, I think Diablo goes into the realm of being too grotesque, where this one kind of keeps it more grounded in reality and not less reality, but more grounded and, like more, I don't know what the,
Not
like,
quite as
less
over the
monstrous,
top.
I
Yeah,
guess.
not as gratuitous.
Yeah, less demonic, less, gratuitous. And then of course, like the sort of just the experience of building my character is the other thing that stands out. And there's a lot of things that go into that. I already mentioned the skill tree, which is huge and expansive and almost overwhelming. But then there's also, just instead of like you're picking between, I think it's six to eight. I forget how many characters that they have, but you're picking a pre-made character that's essentially a character class. But then it's essentially I don't want to call it classless, but it's totally free in how you build out that character. You can add and unlock whatever skills. Like, it almost borrows from the Souls games in a way where you're upgrading your strength, your intelligence, or your dexterity. And based on how high those values are, that can dictate the kinds of skills that you unlock, the kinds of weapons and armor that you can wear. And so it's flexible in a way that, like, I'm playing a sorceress, but if I wanted to spec and be like more of a battle mage who wields a mace and do other things, I can do that. So I think that's really fun, and I've been having a lot of fun experimenting with the different ways that I can kind of build out my character. But yeah, like I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, so I mean, as someone who like I've played Diablo 4, but really the thing that sort of like turned me off to it long term is some of the more just the way that they handle like the live service elements and like the battle pass. And I think a lot of the more like, like the daily quest and the weekly quest, like all of that stuff was really hard for me to get into, where I think, and granted, I haven't gotten into the end game in Path of Exile specifically yet, but it seems like everything here is more like cosmetic and like, it's less finding points on a map and just like, I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, I think these two games have, it's really interesting like where they converge and where they diverge, and the type of person who prefers one or the other. I think, yeah, it's interesting that to me to hear that your what kind of rubbed you the wrong way about Diablo was the presence of a battle pass and stuff, when like the thing that I don't really like about Path of Exile is that, and again, so my experience with Path of Exile 2 specifically was about over a year ago at this point, towards the beginning of the early access, like the first 6 months. And I didn't play, more than like 5 hours or something. So very, very minimal impressions as far as things go. But like they had, you could buy things that were like stash space, I think, and like you had to buy I can't remember, there was some other monetization where it was like you were basically paying for an in-game feature, which was it kind of, it didn't feel right to me. Like it's sort of similar to how like Funcom did back with like Conan Exiles, where there are certain like chests you buy that like allow you to sort easily or something, and while like normally you have to sort manually. It's like, I don't understand why you're gating me from mechanics that you've clearly built into a game that I've purchased already. And that is not to say that there are not monetization issues with Diablo 4 as well. There are.
Right.
But for me personally, I found the ones in Path of Exile 2 rubbed me the wrong way a little bit more than the ones in Diablo did.
I haven't brushed up against it too much, and really all I've noticed is the cosmetics, so I'm not speaking exactly from a place of like fully understanding what they're charging for and what they're not charging for. I will say though that hearing, like that some of the like inventory stuff is locked behind like microtransactions rubs me the wrong way too, because one of my biggest complaints is the inventory. I think the biggest gripe is that there's just so many items. There's so many different orbs that you're picking up, and this orb does that, and this orb, upgrades this kind of item, and this orb, like this, you have all these different, of course, gems and things that you can slot into your items. And so that combined with the frankly strange decision to put have quest items be like take up space in your inventory was just, I think, just a bad decision, because I do find myself going back to town to just sell vendor trash more, and it's gotten to the point where like I've just stopped picking up stuff as much, which I think in my mind kind of defeats the purpose. But yeah, like I think the fact that they're, if they are charging for, you know, extra inventory space while making it sort of like cumbersome to interact with that system, I definitely agree that that's not like good, and I would rather deal with, yeah, like a battle pass and all that stuff.
Yeah, I just double check, and they're specialty tabs. So it's like it
Mm,
basically allows certain items to currencies to stack higher and take up fewer space. Um,
got it.
so yeah, I mean it's not egregious, right? And it's permanent. It's not
Yeah,
like you're having to buy them per character or anything,
yeah.
but it's just like a little bit of like sour taste as a way. This is the way I would put it.
Hmm,
Like where it's
hmm.
like, I don't really like that. It's not going to break your experience, but I just yeah, I thought that was it's you know they and Diablo, like on the Diablo side of things, I'll say like a lot of people had found that if they didn't purchase like this latest expansion due to the way that they reworked the skill tree, um
Hmm.
if you were playing a class that was in the base game, there were certain skills that they couldn't unlock on the skill tree. Um, basically
That
restricting
sucks.
them from using a character class that they'd already purchased. Now, I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, I haven't dug into this deeply. I didn't see it myself because I bought the expansion. I don't know how widespread it was, or if this was fixed, or if it was a bug at first, or whatever. But
Hmm.
people, you will inevitably hear people complaining about things online, and this was like the big one that I saw around the launch of Lord of Hatred. And yeah, I mean, provided that that is still the way it works, that's pretty bad. So
Yeah.
again, it's these sort of ways that they just try to kind of milk a little bit more money out of these games that you've already paid for, which it never is going to feel good.
Yeah, that seems kind of shady, man. Like that seems almost like planned obsolescence, where it's like, yeah, like in order to continue enjoying this character class that you've, you know, been playing, like you have to buy the new game to get access to these new skills. Like, yeah, it's weird. But yeah, I mean, like I think that's just the problem with these games, especially in the live service era, is that you have to continually monetize. Otherwise, you know, people are just going to spend hundreds of hours in your game and like that's it, you know? Like I spent $15 on Path of Exile 2, and like realistically, that's all they're getting out of me. So, you know, like, yeah, like I understand the need to find ways to get creative with this so you can fund more expansions, more updates and things like that. So, yeah, I'm enjoying my time, you know, with Path of Exile. I think, you know, like there are definitely like, there's more friction, than, you know, Diablo. You know, Diablo I think is a very, you know, more, I think you know, it has more of appeal to a more of a casual player, where I think Path of Exile is going to get in your way a lot more. Another issue I had or have with it is just how, just the size of some of these maps, and a lot of the times you end up looking for like tiny little passageways or paths that you haven't revealed yet, and you end up having to like navigate this huge giant space, and wander aimlessly around. So like, you know, I definitely have complaints, you know, about Path of Exile, and I could definitely see myself like I'm not ready to declare like, oh yeah, like I'm a Path of Exile guy now. And I think a lot of that, you know, comes down to the fact that I just haven't played any of the more recent Diablo expansions. So Matthew, take me through your time with Lord of Hatred. You're playing as a paladin, which is one of the new classes. So take me through your experience with the campaign and your experience playing as a new paladin. Maybe sell me on Diablo 4 over Path of Exile.
Yeah, so I played a ton of Diablo 4 at launch back in 2023. It was one of my favorite games of that year, and I played it through a good chunk of 2024, and I burnt out on it right before the first expansion launched, which was Vessel of Hatred. And so I didn't end up even finishing the campaign of that expansion before, like I just stopped playing it around that. I hit a wall where I was tired of it at the time. So Lord of Hatred, there after a 2-year break, is back, and that gave me an opportunity to go back and play through Vessel of Hatred as well. Um, I think that the Lord of Hatred expansion is much better than Vessel of Hatred. Vessel of Hatred, the campaign in it had the feel of a DLC, or even just like some of the seasonal content that they roll out like every 2 or 3 months, where you get like a small storyline. And this was only like Vessel of Hatred only felt marginally bigger than that, and it just happened to feature the characters in the main plot and continue that storyline. It didn't feel like big and monumental in the way that I think a Diablo campaign should. Especially like, compared to the base Diablo 4 campaign, which I thought was great. It did add a new zone, which was good. Because I kind of blew through that expansion, I did not end up spending a ton of time in that zone after I finished it. I moved on to the Lord of Hatred zone, which is the Scovos Isles. They're like, it's got a very like Greek mythology kind of feel to it. It's definitely Greece styled. And yeah, Lord of Hatred, I think it definitely has like final book of the trilogy vibes to it. Like they're bringing in some of the main cast of characters that sat out from the Vessel of Hatred expansion, even some characters that set out of Diablo 4 entirely, but you would know from like, say, Diablo 3 or Diablo 2.
Nice.
There's a couple of callbacks there that have been kind of like, cool for the longtime fan in me to see. It just has a very grand sense of scale to it. And I really like the Paladin class. So the Paladin class, they actually launched a little before the expansion. It was tied to the expansion. You got early access to it if you pre-ordered. The Paladin class, I mean, if you played a Paladin class in like Diablo 2 or something, it's going to feel pretty familiar. You have a mix of like of melee abilities, but also kind of like mid-range abilities. And I would say what's most unique about it is their auras. So you can have like an aura build where you're just popping auras and spamming like one attack ability or whatever. It's actually possible that you can spec your character and to be like an entirely support character if you wanted, like to have no offensive abilities where you're just buffing people you're partied with. I haven't tried that out.
Give me a holy paladin.
Yeah,
let's go.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I've gone for like a mix of auras and like a shield throw ability where you like throw the shield out and it kind of like radiates this like pulse of energy and gives you like a small AoE area where it'll hurt enemies. And that's been really fun to play. I also played around a little bit with a spinning shield build where it's just like you get these kind of like rotating shields that go around you and gradually get further and further away, and they're like hitting any enemies that they pass through as they continue to rotate and spin. So it's been a lot of fun for me to play. I think it's one of my favorite character classes. I've played most of the character classes other than the other new one, the Warlock. I've not tried that yet. And I didn't play the Spiritborn, which was added with Vessel of Hatred, but I've played all the rest. And I would say Paladin is probably top 3. I would say it would be tough for me to rank it. Those top 3 between Rogue, Necromancer, and Paladin. Because I level 3 of those, but it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
I had a great time with it. The build opportunities seem really diverse, and it's been fun getting to explore a new class while also getting to explore new content.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, I think the way that you sold the story really, like, not to say that Path of Exile's storytelling is bad by any means. It's just different than what Blizzard's is. And I think I'm more prone to liking Blizzard storytelling. It's just grander, it's bigger, it's more epic. What Path of Exile does really, really well is it tells these really cool, unique stories around the different areas that you're traversing. So you're learning about the different areas and you're, like exploring, tombs and caverns and dungeons and like, figuring out what happened to the world. And of course, you're doing battle with these, gods and people who have, these all powerful entities. So it's a less like grand approach, but it is, not to compare it again to Souls games, but it is similar to, like Souls games. There's a little bit more environmental storytelling happening, or more just like happening in the areas that you're in, more so than this big overarching plot.
How have you found the variety in those sort of minor stories? Because I would say one complaint I have about Diablo 4 in general is that there's quite a bit of side quests there, and they do try to fill in the regional storytelling that you're talking about. But my wife and I have a running joke in that every time you pick up a side quest in this game, either the person who gave you the quest is going to betray you, or they're going to die and you're going to have to fight whatever killed them. Like
that was,
yeah.
Yeah, that was one thing that stood out to me. Whereas like it's, I compared it to, like sort of like the dark Magic the Gathering, but it's not as grotesque, or it doesn't go as like it there's definitely more variety there. There's definitely, like, that was one thing that stood out, was like, oh wait, everyone in this world isn't miserable all of the time. That's amazing. Like there are people, like there's a treasure hunter that you're helping out, like you're helping him find treasure in these like, sort of like, Aztec inspired ruins and things like that. And so like there is more of like an adventurous type of feel to what you're doing. There is obviously an overarching plot. There are quest lines where, like this person was banished because they betrayed, the entire group of people, and you have to like put them out of their misery, essentially. So, there are definitely storylines and storytelling that veers into the more dark territory. But I think overall it is a little bit more palatable.
Yeah, that definitely sounds good. I do want to go back to Path of Exile. I will say, I think, some of what you talked about the character development aspect of it is sort of what pushes me away, or makes me a little bit more hesitant to get into it, is because, so the way I play Diablo is I will experiment with builds, but I like being able to just like look up online, like, okay, what's a good build for doing this with this class? And it's like a 5-minute search for me to just like quickly respec or whatever and play in a certain way. And there's like a degree, there's like a fine line between having the right amount of customization to play the way you want, and drowning in options where I feel like I'm going to be running with an inefficient build if I'm not following a guide. You know what I mean? And I feel like Diablo 4, especially now that they've tweaked the skill tree a little bit in Lord of Hatred, the way it works, I feel like it's hard to make a bad build. Like you can make a suboptimal build, obviously, but you're going to be having fun regardless of how you do it. And Path of Exile, with the way that they handle their skill progression and attributes and everything, has always seemed like, I better not mess this up, or like I'm going to be so ineffective, I might as well not even play this. Is that true? Is there any? Have you found that to be the case, or have you been following a guide and when you're making your build?
So I'm not following a guide when I'm making my build. I'm kind of winging it as I go. But I did have this sort of, I mentioned earlier in our conversation that, I experimented with making more of like a battle mage, and it went terribly. So yeah, I think I'm kind of reserving it or my thoughts on that, like, for like the end game, because it looks like, and I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like I'll be able to unlock different starting points on the skill tree, which I think is my issue, where like you basically you have the tree is essentially just a big giant circle, and the way that my skill tree at least has me, like, is sort of guiding me, is building it up towards the north, where like if I wanted to go more melee, like tank focus, I had to go toward like the west side of mine. And like, just to get to where over there, I felt like I wasted a lot of space and nodes. And so I think a lot of that is definitely a factor in Path of Exile 2, but I'm hoping that there's a little bit more, in the end game, to give you options to like sort of like choose what area you want to focus on, rather than, because right now I do feel like because I picked the sorceress, it is in my best interest to play my sorceress like a traditional magic caster. So while I do see the sort of like the framework and like the amount of flexibility that there is, it's not as much as I was anticipating, which, or at least given my sort of first reaction. So yeah, it's, I don't want to say, yeah, I don't want to compare it to Diablo, because I think Diablo is a little bit more, beginner friendly and is a little bit more linear. But I do think that there's times where it just doesn't, it doesn't give me as much, or it's not as I feel like I can't always make as an effective build using it as, compared to Diablo, which I think is it's pretty easy to make an effective build.
Yeah, and Diablo does split it out. I mean, because I think in Path of Exile, you kind of always can see everything that's even available to your in-game characters, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Whereas Diablo, once you hit the level cap, you unlock the Paragon boards, which is where you get something more similar to the Path of Exile style, where you can put sort of like slot these big different squares together, and you work through them, and when you get to another edge, you get to drop another board there, and so you get customization that way, and it when you get to that, like you can make a bad build with that.
Yeah.
It does give you the option there, and as you start like ramping up the difficulties in the end game, I did a bit of that back at launch before some of the bigger changes, but yeah, and in that situation, you're there's certainly suboptimal ways that you can take it there that you definitely feel, but for the core character build, like in terms of choosing your skill abilities and that sort of thing, that's where it's kind of hard to mess up. So I feel like maybe Diablo kind of parses that out a bit better, whereas like Path of Exile is going to appeal to the people who like want to theory craft, want to like build their own class and really get into the weeds and tinker with the stuff like right from the jump. Which that's a large part of the ARPG audience. Like that shouldn't be discounted. There's a reason why a lot of people prefer Path of Exile to Diablo 4, and I think that's probably one of the big reasons.
Yeah, it can be, it definitely feels overwhelming, and it's definitely, I'm torn on whether or not I would prefer the Diablo approach versus the Path of Exile approach, because there is something I do enjoy about like, okay, like, it really reminds me a lot of the sphere grid in Final Fantasy X, of like just being able to see like, okay, where do all these paths lead and what's the best way to get there? But okay, well, what if I want to, swing around and get this on the way? Like it's easy to get lost in. But I do appreciate that, like the way Diablo sections it out to where like, okay, now it's time to lock in after you've reached the max level. Whereas I feel like I'm constantly having to lock in for Path of Exile 2. So, but yeah, like you said, man, like I think this Path of Exile 2 speaks to a more hardcore audience. I am glad that they are taking steps to sort of make it more approachable. And, as somebody who is kind of a more casual gamer, like I think it is kind of like already in that, like I do think that it is approachable, despite some of the sort of quibbles that I have with it. I was also looking up on Reddit while you were talking about Diablo, and looking on the build guides thing. It seems like that's still kind of like early. People are still figuring it out. So yeah, like I think even like with the sort of like the steps that they're taking to make it more approachable, like it's definitely still a work in progress, and it definitely still is one of those games that appeals more to like the hardcore crowd.
Yeah,
but I'm glad I'm playing it. I'm enjoying it. I definitely like I said, I'm still torn on whether or not I'm done with Diablo forever. Spoilers, I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend you go back and maybe on discount or something, like during a sale, pick up the latest expansion, which I think includes the middle expansion now. And even if you just play through it for the story, I think it's totally worth it. We talked about some of the more like, single player first person shooter campaigns that you can get. Like even if you weren't interested in any of the extra trappings around it, any of the in-game activity or build crafting or anything, you could just straight up play through the Diablo 4 campaign and its 2 expansions. And it's a great story. It's a good time. It takes you to a lot of cool looking places, and just you can kind of appreciate the storytelling and the spectacle that they're putting on. So I mean, I think not just to you, but to anybody that is like an ARPG novice, like I think Diablo 4 is a perfect balance between getting the new players in, but also having just enough depth at the end of the experience to appeal to people who have been around with it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, TBD on whether or not Path of Exile 2 will like consume, like be all of the ARPG I play. But I do really want to play Lord of Hatred, because I did not play Vessel of Hatred. So yeah, I definitely want to check out all that content, because it's, yeah, I mean, like, there's still few developers that are doing story like Blizzard is. And, even in this sort of like latest iteration of Blizzard, they're still putting out banger stories with great, like, amazing locations and great gameplay to back it up too. So yeah, by no means am I done with Diablo.
Last thing I'll say about Diablo, I will say that some of the set armor and stuff that they're putting out for like both for like cosmetics for purchase and just like in-game cosmetic or like in-game sets that are in Diablo 4, some of the coolest set designs I would say since like early World of Warcraft days. Like they look fantastic for the classes that are in Diablo 4. So if you're into that sort of thing, that's another plus for it.
You're selling me, Matthew. But we will have to wait and see if I jump on the Diablo 4 bandwagon again. Maybe we'll talk about it on another episode, because this episode is over. We appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us, talking about video games. We want to remind you guys that you can listen to past episodes and find us on your social network of choice at timekillerspod.com. Once you do that and follow us, DM us your questions, your comments, your concerns, and your hot takes, anything having to do with the world of video games or movies, anything we kill time with. And don't forget, whatever podcast service that you're listening to us on, subscribe to us, leave us a review, and let us know how much you love us. With that, Matthew, anything you want to say to the fine folks before we sign off?
See you in Sanctuary.
I will see you in Sanctuary, or Matthew will see you in Sanctuary, and I will see you on the streets in Rayclast. Y'all have a good one.